Private sector allowed to import jet fuel. Midwives go on trade union action. Mihintale sacred ground to be used for tourism. Group of inmates from Kandakadu Rehabilitation Center escape. Won Muralidharan Trophy Test Series begins in Galle.
In your top story this afternoon, a group of inmates held at the Kandakadu Treatment and Rehabilitation Center in Polonnaruwa have fled the premises. Commissioner General of Rehabilitation Major General Darshana Hettiarachchi told Newsfirst that an inmate moved to the premises had behaved in an unruly manner. During the commotion, several inmates had fled. He also said that the 36-year-old inmate who behaved in an unruly manner had also died. He was identified as a resident from Mutwal. Moving on to more news, another Sri Lankan family lost their breadwinner who was at a fuel queue. The father of two died after he was knocked down by a lorry while waiting for fuel in Alutgama.
A 53-year-old father of two died after he was knocked down by a lorry in Dargah town in Alutgama last night. Reports said that he was preparing to leave the filling station and head home when the tragedy struck. The driver of the Mathugama-bound lorry surrendered to the police this morning. At the same time, there is still no confirmation with regard to the arrival of fuel shipment, as long queues were again witnessed outside fuel stations in a scene which has now become a common sight in the country. Only Lanka IOC filling stations are issuing fuel to all consumers, subject to limitations. A fuel tanker reached the Madampe IOC filling station with a police escort this morning. A tense situation arose as some who were originally not in the fuel queue attempted to obtain fuel. Sri Lanka police and Sri Lanka army personnel intervened to control the unruly crowd. Fuel was also issued from the Mount Lavinia Lanka IOC filling station, and a long queue was seen waiting for hours for fuel distribution. However, allegations was made citing that the token system was not followed to distribute fuel. A limited stock of petrol was received by the Dambulla Lanka IOC filling stations. The general public and public servants were seen standing in line for fuel purchasing. The Ambalangoda filling station received fuel for the first time in several days. A tense situation arose at the premises due to a large crowd gathering to obtain fuel. The situation was brought under control following police intervention. Meanwhile, the government announced recently its decision to provide fuel only for essential services. However, thousands continue to line up opposite filling stations to obtain fuel. In Kaluthara, people have been in line for several days. Tokens for fuel were issued by the Sri Lanka Army to the people who were waiting in line for fuel at the Polonnaruwa filling station.
Sri Lanka has decided to grant permission to the private sector to import jet fuel. The decision was reached following a meeting between Minister Nimal Siripala de Silva, airline representatives and fuel storage operators in the country. Only the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation was allowed to import jet fuel to Sri Lanka so far. The US dollar crisis had made it nearly impossible to import jet fuel to the country. Fuel storage operators had informed the minister of their fullest support if the laws are amended to allow the private sector to import jet fuel to the country. Aviation authorities in Sri Lanka have been instructed to support this measure. Sri Lanka limited the use of fuel for essential services from midnight to try and extend the available reserves until the 10th of July. And with restrictions also in place, public transport has also been limited.
Many Sri Lankans have opted to use the train due to the collapse in public transport services following the depletion of fuel reserves in the country. Here's what the Fort railway station looked like this morning. According to reports, many Colombo-bound trains were delayed. A large crowd was present at the Muratu railway station to commute by train. The chairman of the Railway Station Masters Association, Sumedha Somaratna, said that many railway workers have been unable to report to duty due to the fuel shortage. Buses operating in major cities were jam-packed with commuters. This was the situation in Ratnalane on Galle Road. Private buses did not operate from the Bogambara main bus station in Kandy, severely inconveniencing the commuters. Chairman of the Sri Lanka Private Bus Owners Association, Gabunu Vijayaratna, told Newsfirst that the number of buses operating in the country is dropping by the day. The number of students and teachers reporting to school that are open was at a low.
The fuel crisis is starting to cripple the health sector in the country as fewer doctors and minor staffers are reporting to work due to the difficulty in obtaining fuel. Now, this has severely impacted the day-to-day operations at hospitals.
The health sector in the country has been under a great stress as a result of the drug and fuel shortage related crises in the country caused by the deficit of US dollars. And on top of that, fuel crisis has caused major crisis in the health sector as well, as doctors and health staff spend many hours and sometimes days in fuel queues trying to fill their tanks to report to work. The situation had directly impacted the patients and doctors along with the health staff at the Katugahen Hospital in Matugama have decided to report to work on bicycles.
The public health inspectors and several other trade unions have decided to engage in a trade union action, citing their inability to report to work due to the fuel shortage. Public health inspectors, midwives, ECG, EEG technicians, Association of the Medical Laboratory and Public Health Laboratory, Association of Dentists and the Association of Pharmacists are engaging in this trade union action. All postal services have been restricted to 3 days. Postmaster General Ranjitha Veeratna said that all post and sub-post offices will be opened only on Tuesdays, Wednesdays and Thursdays. The offices will be open from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. on the relevant days. Although a decision was made to open post offices for 3 days during a week, certain post offices have been closed for many days. The postmasters have decided to close down all the post offices under the Ginigathena Divisional Secretariat from today till the 4th of July. People who arrived at the post office in Galle were severely inconvenienced as it was closed today.
A protest opposing the government took place in Ambalangoda yesterday. The people demanded the resignations of the president who created the present crisis and the current prime minister. People engaged in protest dubbed Kitchen Lament at the Panapitiya junction along Horana Kalutara main road.
The Mahanayaka of the Asgiri chapter, Most Venerable Varakagoda Sri Jnanaratna Thera, stated that the country is facing the present crisis as the advice of the Mahanayaka Theras were not followed.
Looking at the current situation of the country, none speak of anything related to politics. However, even a child knows where the country has fallen to now. They know what is the reason behind this too. However, what we all can do is to be sorry for what happened, but cannot do anything about it. As Theros, we warned them and provided guidance at certain times. However, they did not follow. Several years before, we told them if matters continues this way, the country will be heading to a disaster. However, they clearly showed they will not listen to us. As a result, the monks are living in the country with a lot of frustration, as there is no use in speaking about issues because the suggestions are not heard. The Most Venerable Mahanayaka Thero was speaking at the unveiling of the Buddha statue and the construction of a golden fence on the occasion of the birthday of Venerable Lianvala Sasana Ratna Thero, the chief incumbent of Madavala Sri Jinamangala Ramaya in Kandy. School equipment was also distributed to 150 students in line with this event.
The Parliamentary Committee on Public Enterprises has decided to inquire into the CEB's purchases, power generation, distribution and power projects. COPE Chairman Professor Charita Herath stated that the COPE will meet daily from the 19th to conduct this investigation. The decision was taken following a request made by the members of COPE when the Ceylon Electricity Board was summoned to the committee recently. Meanwhile, former Central Bank Governors Ajit Niwad Cabral, Professor W.D. Lakshman, former Secretary to the Ministry of Finance S.R. Artigala and former Secretary to the President P.B. Jayasundara have been summoned again to the Committee on Public Finance. COPE Chairman MP Anura Priyadarshana Yapa said they had decided to reconvene to inquire into the country's economic slowdown over the past 2 years. The chief incumbent of the Galmadua Sulukula Chetiyarama temple in Mihintale alleges that the temple property is to be used for a tourism project.
The historic Galmadua Sulugulu Chetiyarama temple, built during the King Devanampiya era from the Anuradhapura kingdom, was donated to the Malayadeva Maharahat Thero by a layman known as Sulugulu. It is reported that the chief incumbent of the temple had made repeated requests from the political and official authorities to protect and preserve the premises. However, those requests had fallen on deaf ears. Over the past few days, the archaeological boundary of the temple had been removed without the consent of the chief incumbent of the temple.
In news overseas, Israeli lawmakers have unanimously approved a bill to dissolve parliament, a key legislative step that pushes the country closer towards its fifth election in less than 4 years.
Members of Prime Minister Naftali Bennett's outgoing coalition and the opposition led by former President Benjamin Netanyahu have been sparring in Israel's parliament since last week over a dissolution bill. The coalition said it wanted quick approval of the bill after Bennett announced last week that his year-old 8-party alliance was no longer tenable.
Ukraine said at least 18 people were killed on Monday, that is yesterday, by an intentional Russian missile strike against the shopping center in Kremenchuk.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said more than 1,000 people were inside the building when the missile struck. However, Russia have denied the allegation. Moscow said that it had struck a nearby depot of the US and European arms, triggering an explosion which ignited a fire in a mall in Kremenchuk. The G7 called the hit a Russian war crime, while Zelensky said it was one of the biggest terrorist attacks in the European history, accusing Russia of directly targeting civilians.
The United Nations has said that more than 300,000 civilians were killed in the first 10 years of Syria's conflict.
Another report by the world body said more than 100 detainees have been killed in a Syrian camp. The civilian deaths report published by the UN Human Rights Office followed what the organization said was a rigorous assessment and a statistical analysis of the available data on civilian casualties. According to the report, 306,887 civilians are estimated to have been killed in Syria between the 1st of March 2011 and the 31st of March 2021 due to this conflict.
In sports news, the first of the two-match test series between touring Australians and Sri Lanka got underway at the Galle International Cricket Stadium today. Prior to the commencement of the match, Sri Lanka played a tribute that was organised by Sri Lanka Cricket for legendary Australian cricketer Shane Warne. And that's a wrap of lunchtime news here on News First, where the people come first. Thank you for joining. You can always visit our website, that is www.newsfirst.lk, for all these stories and much more. Take care and stay safe.
ප්‍රේක්ෂක ඔබට තිලින කළ චිත්‍රපට දැන් ඔබේ ප්‍රියතමත් එක්ක කිකි ඔස්සේ නරඹන්න. රසය, හාස්‍ය, කුතුහලය රැගෙන සිනමා රසික ඔබගේ අසීමිත රසවින්දනයට අදම කිකි ඩවුන්ලෝඩ් කරන්න.